Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we will be learning today in Yirtz Hashem Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn halachos Bais HaKnesses, the halachos that pertain to the Kedusha, the sanctity of the Bais HaKnesses and the Bais HaMedrash, what you're allowed to do in the Bais HaKnesses, what you're not allowed to do in the Bais HaKnesses and the Bais HaMedrash, etc. We begin on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. We are up to the last word in the Shulchan Aruch on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Says the Mechaber, Ve'ein mechashvim bahem cheshbonos. You can't sit down in the shul and start to make cheshbonos, to make calculations. You can't sit down in the shul and start to reconcile the books. Ella imkein heim shal mitzvahs. Unless the cheshbonos that you're making are cheshbonos of mitzvah, kigoin, for example, kupa shel tzedakah. If the gabbai has to sit down and open up the pushkas and count the money, and one pushka is for the building campaign, one is for the Sefer Torah campaign, one is for Kinyan Svarim, so he has to count up the money and enter the proper amounts into spreadsheets, etc., etc. That would be a cheshbon shel mitzvah. That would be something that you're allowed to do. Says the Mechaber kigon kupa shel tzedakah. For example, the pushkas of tzedakah or the tzedakah funds upidyon shvuyim, or if they're collecting money for pidyon shvuyim, if they have somebody who was taken prisoner by the Einom Yehudim, and they need to ransom him out, and they're raising money, so you can make calculations for Pidyon Shvuyim in the shul as well. Says the Biur Halacha, in my print of the Mishnah Berurah, the Biur Halacha begins on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. I think it's some other prints, it's here on Lamed Beis Amud Beis. Biur Halacha Dibur HaMaschil Ve'ein mechashvin bahem cheshbonos. The Chavetz Chaim says, Hainu, what the Mechaber is trying to tell you over here is, even if these are cheshbonos that are tzarchei tzibbur, so they're cheshbonos that have to do with the needs of the tzibbur, but somehow they're not divrei mitzvah. Says the Chavetz Chaim, and the committee in charge of whatever fund this is doesn't have another conference room, if you will, available to make these cheshbonos, so they want to get together in the shul because, okay, we'll come for mincha and we'll go to the table in the back, we have plenty of room, and we'll make our cheshbonos over there. You can't do that. Why, says the Biur Halacha? Mipnei shu kalus roish b'chvoid Bais HaKnesses. Because this would be a zilzal in the kavod of the Bais HaKnesses. And if you think about the words that I just used, the shul is not a conference room that's available for your conferences. That's not what the shul is. So you don't make cheshbonos, even if they're for the tzibbur. You don't make cheshbonos in the shul unless they are cheshbonos shel mitzvah. Continues to be our halacha. Or it's loymar, the afal pi shehu tzarich rabim, even though it's a tzarich rabim, right? Because what does it say over here? It says, he's bringing down from the Ramban over here in the Biur Halacha, even though the Bnei Ir need these cheshbonos and you need enough room for people to get together. So you see very clearly what the Ramban is saying is, the Afal Pishu Tzarech Rabim, even though these cheshbonos are Tzarech Rabim, you can't do them in the shul. The Chol Shekain Cheshbonos Shal Yachid, certainly if a Yachid wants to sit down and reconcile his bank statements in the shul, certainly you're not allowed to do that. And the Mechaber here on the top of Lamed Beis Amud Beis said, unless they're cheshbonos of mitzvah, for example, tzedakah funds, the shul's funds that have to do with Kinyan Svarim, etc., etc., that you would be allowed to do. Continues the Mechaber, the last word on the top line, Lamed Beis Amud Beis. Ve'ein haspeidim bahem. You're not allowed to have a levayos in a shul. You're not haspeidim mace. You don't give eulogies on a mace in the shul or in the Bais HaMedrash. Ve'ein haspeidim bahem. Ella imken yiyah hahesped le'echad migdolei ha'ir, unless you're talking about a hesped on one of the gedolei ha'ir. If you have somebody who was a Talmid Chacham, who was echad migdolei ha'ir, from the great people of the city, then the Mechaber says you can have the hesped in the shul. But then the Mechaber continues, and he says an interesting thing. Shekol b'nei ha'ir miskabtzim uvayim lahaspeidim. If it's echad migdolei ha'ir, and therefore all the people of the city are gathering and coming to join in the haspeidim, then you could do it in the shul. Why, it sounds like? Because pashut, you need the space. So from a simple reading of the Mechaber, first the Mechaber says you can't make a hesped in the shul. Then the Mechaber qualifies this, and he says you could make a hesped in the Bais HaKnesses or in the Bais HaMedrash if it's le'echad migdolei ha'ir. So first of all, the Mechaber doesn't tell us what that means. Echad migdolei ha'ir, one of the great people of the city. What kind of greatness? We have to look at that. Then the Mechaber gives us what seems to be a reason why it's mutter to hold the hesped in the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash if it's echad migdolei ha'ir. And what's that? Shekol b'nei ha'ir miskabtzin uvam lahaspeidim, because you're going to have a large crowd coming for the hesped, and pashut, you need the room. So what does that mean? Does that mean that any time you're going to have a large levayos, you can hold it in the shul because you need the room? And again, what is this echad migdolei ha'ir? What kind of greatness? Is it talking about a rich person? Is it talking about a Talmid Chacham? What are we talking about here? So let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Yud. Ha'ir, echad migdolei ha'ir. So first, the Chavetz Chaim tells us something that we would not necessarily have discerned from the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. From the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, it sounds like you're giving a hesped on one of the Gdolei ha'ir, which would mean that one of the Gdolei ha'ir died, and you're being maspid him. But a careful reading of the Mechaber would show us, it says, Ela imken yeh ha'hesped le'echad migdolei ha'ir. The hesped, another way to the two ways you can teach this. One is that it's a hesped on one of the Gdolei ha'ir, or it's a hesped le'echad migdolei ha'ir, meaning that it's negeya to one of the Gdolei ha'ir. What could that mean? Well, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Yud. Ha'ir shemeis kroivai shel hagadol. A relative of one of the Gedolim died. And because the nifter is a relative of the gadol, therefore everybody is coming to join in the hesped lichvoid, not necessarily lichvoid the nifter, but lichvoid the gadol ha'ir. So very interesting. The Chavetz Chaim is telling us over here, it doesn't only mean that you're giving the hesped on one of the Gdolei ha'ir, meaning that the nifter is one of the Gdolei ha'ir. But even if the nifter is a relative of one of the Gdolei ha'ir, so that the hesped belongs, so to speak, to one of the Gdolei ha'ir because it's his relative, that's also mutter. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, v'choshken kisha hesped al Talmid Chacham. Certainly, if the hesped is on the Talmid Chacham himself, then certainly the levayos, the haspeidim, could be held in the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash. The Chavetz Chaim inserts over here into Mishnah Berurah's Katan Yud, ha'ari hayanizar ma'oid. The Ari personally was extremely careful. Shaloi ledaber bebeis HaKnesses rak tfilosai. The Ari HaKadosh, he only said words of tefillah in the Bais HaKnesses, nothing else. Afilu divrei musar loy diber. He didn't even give a musar shmuz in the Bais HaKnesses. Pen yimashech bimenu divrei chayil, because it might end up going to speaking divrei chayil in the Bais HaKnesses, and the Arizal was not going to risk speaking anything other than tefillah in the Bais HaKnesses. Now, there's an interesting footnote over here. Dirshu footnote number 28. So, I alluded to this question. So why is it that we're allowed to make a hesped for echad migdolei ha'ir in the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash? From the reading of the Shulchan Aruch, it sounds like pashut, you need the space. Like the Mechaber said, shekol b'nei ha'ir miskabtzin uvam lahaspeidim. So the Dirshu footnote brings down over here, v'atam shem haspeidim oisai bebeis HaKnesses, the reason you could be maspid one of the Gdolei ha'ir in the shul, Pirish Rashi brings down here Rashi from Megillah Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis, shekevon shetzrichim rabim lehisasef lehesped, since you push it, a lot of people are going to be coming to the hesped. A lot of people are going to be coming to the hesped. Makmas chashivas haniftar, because of the chashivas of the niftar, oy kroivoi, or his relative. Mishum kach haspeidim bebais HaKnesses. Therefore, you're allowed to be haspeidim in the Bais HaKnesses. Sheroi lozeh shehu beis gadol, behu bayis gadol, because the Bais HaKnesses is appropriate for such an activity because there's plenty of room. Now, I've said this many times in the shir. This is a lesson I always say that I learned from my older brother, Rav Yosef Asher, many, many years ago. Whenever a sefer brings down a Rishon or a Gemara or a Brisa, always look it up. So here I have the Rashi in front of me. Rashi says like this, Hesped shal Rabbim. So first of all, another question that I alluded to is, who is this Echad Migdolei Yair? What does that mean, Echad Migdolei Yair? The answer to that question is also in this Rashi in Megillah. Rashi says like this, Hesped shel Rabbim. The Gemara says over here, you can have a Hesped shel Rabbim. Umaspidin bahen Hesped shel Rabbim. You're allowed to have a Hesped that belongs to the Rabbim, to the tzibbur. Such a Hesped you're allowed to make in a Bais HaKnesses or a Bais HaMedrash. Says Rashi, Dibra Maschel Hesped shel Rabbim, Shel Talmid Chacham Shemeis. So first of all, what are we speaking about over here? Echad Migdolei Yair. We're talking about a Talmid Chacham. That's what we're talking about. Says Rashi, Shel Talmid Chacham Shemeis Shetzrichin Lihisasef Ulahaspidoi. And now everybody needs, and I'm going to be medayik in that word, Shetzrichin Lihisasef Ulahaspidoi. Everybody is required. Tzarich means to need. Everybody's required to gather ulahaspidai and to be maspeidim. Ubeis HaKnesses roi lekach. The shul is suited for this. Lefi shu bayis gadol, because it's big. Oh, so what do we have over here? We have a hesped of a Talmid Chacham. Since it's a hesped of a Talmid Chacham, Rashi says everybody is required to gather and to join in the haspeidim. Therefore, you could do it in the Bais HaKnesses. Now let's go back to Dirshu footnote number 28, and let's continue it. He says in the second paragraph, V'maniftar einoi Talmid Chacham oikroivai. Let's say the niftar was not a Talmid Chacham or a relative of a Talmid Chacham. Ach, Rabbim boim lehesped. But a lot of people are coming from the hesped anyway. Very popular person in town. Maybe even popular for a very good reason. I don't mean to knock the idea. The person could be popular. Maybe the person was a tremendous Bal Chesed or Balas Chesed. But he's not a Talmid Chacham. So what about that case? V'maniftar ein Talmid Chacham oikroivai. Ach, Rabbim boim lehesped. Kasa b'shalos tshuvas Rav Payalim she'ein heter lahaspidai bebeis HaKnesses. Then there would be no heter to make haspeidim in the shul. V'rak l'Talmid Chacham oikroivai shaharabim michuyavim lahaspidai mishum kvaidai. It's only for a Talmid Chacham or the relative of a Talmid Chacham where the tzibbur is mechuyev to join in the haspeidim. That's when we have this heter. And the truth is, that's what I'm showing you in Rashi in Megillah. Because Rashi uses the word shetzrichim lehisasef. If we're talking about a hesped on a gadol b'Torah, we're talking about a hesped on a relative of a gadol b'Torah, then there's a chiyuv on the tzibbur to gather and join in the hesped. Oh, if the tzibbur has a chiyuv, mitam halacha, then the shul is available for their needs. So it's not just that it happens to be there's going to be a very big levay, a very popular person in town died, so now we'll make the levay in the shul. No, we're not doing this for convenience sakes. We're doing it because if it's a Talmid Chacham or the relative of a Talmid Chacham, then there's a chiyuv mitam halacha that the whole tzibur has to get together and join in the hesped, and they need a big room. So for that, the shul is available. In the third paragraph of the footnote here, they bring down an interesting shaila. There's one shaila which is to make the haspeidim in the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash. Then there's another shaila, and that is bringing the mace into the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash. Can you actually bring in the Oren? So it says over here, "Ule'inyan haknesses hamita b'shas haspeidim lebeis hamedrash." Kasav Shulchan Aruch brings down the mechaber from Yeridea. Sharak chacham aluf v'goyin. Only a tremendous talmid chacham machnisim mitasei lebeis hamedrash lehaspeidim. V'achachmas adam kasav she'ein lasis kein afle b'shareitzim lechabdoi. The Chachmas Adam says you don't do this even for somebody of stature who the tzibbur taka wants to be mechabed. Elarak legoyin v'chasid v'yochid b'doiroi. Only a real gadol adar kahagra. Ubir b'shal t'chuvas maramshik shekavanosoi he that when the Chachmas Adam writes this, his kavana was she'af l'tamel chacham ein lasis kein. You don't do this even for a regular Talmid Chacham. Ke'ein b'yameinu misha yikra chacham olaf v'goyin. He says we don't have somebody that's worthy of those titles. And he brings down over here v'chein tziva goyin Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal shalo yachnisu es mitasai el toichech shalo yachnisu es mitasai el toichech al kadosh shal yeshiva Bais HaMedrash. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal was mitzaveh. He left over in his tzavah that his aron should not be brought into, not aron, Israel, they don't have an aron, his beer, his mita, should not be brought in to the Bais HaMedrash or the Bais HaKnesses. Okay, however, HaTorah Chaim Kasav, the Torah Chaim writes, Shenagu lahaknis mitas rav v'tamel chacham leBais HaKnesses haspeidim, that the minig is that they do bring the beer of a rav, a tamel chacham, into the shul to be haspeidim, im hayot tzadik, if he was known to be a tzadik, v'lamad l'shem shamayim, and he learned Torah l'shem shamayim, mishum kavod HaTorah. And he bases it on ki Yiftach b'doiroi ki Shmuel b'doiroi. Yiftach was a lot less than Shmuel HaNavi, but Yiftach was the gadol in his time. Shmuel the gadol was the gadol in his time. Yiftach b'doiroi ki Shmuel b'doiroi. We learned that out from a pasuk in Tehillim. Zed dar darshav. Every generation has its gedolim, and it's the gadol that's suited for that generation. So whoever the gedolim are in your dar, that's the gadol. So you could be maspid him in a Bais HaKnesses or a Bais HaMedrash. V'chein kasa b'shal s'tshuvas malamed l'hoyel shenagu b'bedinos Hungaria lahaknis aroinoi sharav gadol l'Bais HaKnesses v'heyed, and he says testimony shekach osu ba'levayos Rabbi Kiva Eger v'aksav sofer shechnisu es ha'aron l'Bais HaKnesses b'shas haspeidim, that they brought the beer or the aron into the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash. I could say that I saw on, it's sad that it was Negeya, but on two Kol Yungalite in Yeshiva Staten Island, two Yungalite, one who was a significant Talmid Chacham who learned for many, many years, another one who was also somebody who learned for many years, but he was also a Bal Yisurim Nifla, and both of those haspeidim were made in the Bais HaMedrash, and they brought the aron into the Bais HaMedrash by the psak of my Rebbe, as I'll say, Gesundenstark, Reuben Feinstein Shlita. Okay. Now we go weiter. Says the Mechaber. We're 3 lines down on Lamed Beis, near the beginning of the line. Says the Mechaber. V'im tzarich li kanes b'hem l'tzarchai. What if you need to go into the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash l'tzarchai, for your own needs? Kigoyin. What does that mean? Kigoyin, for example, likroi la'adam. You need to go into the Bais HaKnesses or to the Bais HaMedrash to call somebody out. So now, you're not, what's driving you to go in is not that you want to go in to learn. You're also not going in to get out of the heat or to get out of the rain, which we learned is asur, because in that case, you could go anywhere. Why are you going into the Bais HaKnesses or to the Bais HaMedrash to find your air conditioning? Go into the public library and get your air conditioning there. Nowadays, I don't know if you're allowed to recommend that people should go into the public library. I come from a day and age where you could go into the public library. Nowadays, I'm not so sure that you can go into the public library because of the garbage that they have in the public library. But you don't have to go into the shul to get out of the heat or to get out of the rain. But what if you need to go into the shul, but it's l'tzarchai? So, for example, you need somebody for something. There's somebody you need to speak to about something, and you cannot speak to him about it in the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash. Or somebody's wife is standing outside. She needs her husband. So you got to go into the shul. Now, over here, you have no choice. You have to go into the Bais HaKnesses or into the Bais HaMedrash because that's the only way you could resolve the problem. The only way you could get this individual is to go in and call him. So you have to go in. But at the same time, you're not going in for Torah, you're not going in for Tefillah. There's a zilzul in the covenant of the Bais HaMedrash. So what do? So says the Mechaber. You should go in, v'yikra ma'at, and read some psukim. Take out a chumash, read some Torah Shabbat. Oy yomer dvar shmua, or go in and say a vort. Tell somebody over a vort. Or another pshat dvar shmua, learn a Mishnah, learn a shtickle Gemara, learn 2 lines. V'achakach yikra'enu. And after you do that, so now you came into the Bais HaMedrash or into the Bais HaKnesses, and you said some psukim, you learned a Mishnah, you said a vort. Now go and call the person that you needed to call. But Pedavka do it that way. Do the Torah first, says the Mechaber. Why? Don't call him first and then learn something, because then it's very obvious that the only reason you went in was to call him out. Now, the truth is that is why you went in, but we don't want it to look that way. Why? Because that's a zilzul in the covenant of the Bais HaMedrash. We don't want people looking at you and saying, "Oh, why is he here? Oh, he came to call Ruvain." That's a zilzul in the Bais HaMedrash or the Bais HaKnesses. It shows that you could go in to call out Ruvain. If somebody comes in, sits down, takes out a chumash, learns a few psukim, and then he goes and he gets Ruvain, then it's not boilet, it's not sticking out that he went in only to call Ruvain. Continues the Mechaber, if Nebuch, this person doesn't know either how to read Torah Shabbat or to learn Torah Shabbat Peh, then he should say to one of the children that are learning there in the Bais HaMedrash, Kroli pasuk sha'ata koirei. Read to me the pasuk that you're reading. Or alternatively, if that's also not an option, yishem ma'at, what he should do is he should wait a little bit in the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash, v'achakach yetze, and then go out. Why? Shehayeshiva behem mitzvah. Because the truth is that even sitting in the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash is also a mitzvah. Shenever, like David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Ashrei yoshvei veisecha. Fortunate are those who sit in your house. Why are they fortunate? Because they're being mekayim a mitzvah. V'shir hayeshiva. How much do you need to sit? And we're going to see, it doesn't really mean that he has to sit. It could be standing also. But how long does he have to wait in order to be mekayim this? The amount of time it takes to walk a distance equal to the width of 2 standardized doorways, which means 8 tvachim. Apparently a minimal doorway was 4 tvachim wide, so 2 doorways is 8 tvachim. So if you wait the amount of time it takes to walk 8 tvachim, which is a very insignificant distance, it's an amma and a third, you wait that amount of time, so it's what, 3 feet? It's very little. If you wait that amount of time, that's enough. So again, you have to go into the Bais HaKnesses. What's the eitzah? 2 eitzahs. Either, let's say, the case given in the Mechaber is, you need to go to call somebody. So go in, sit down, say a few psukim, say some dvar Torah, then get up and go get the guy. So now it doesn't look like you went in only to call the guy. It's you went in to learn. Agav, you also called the guy. You don't know how to learn? Ask a kid or ask somebody else in the Bais HaMedrash, nu zog epis. Tell me epis, a little dvar Torah, and then call the guy. You don't have that eitzah either. There's nobody in there to talk to. So okay, what should you do then? Then what the Mechaber seems to say is, wait a little bit and then go out, which now it sounds a little bit like you don't have to wait a little bit and then call the guy. You could call the guy and then wait a little bit, because it says yishema'at, wait a little, va'achakach yetze, and then go out. So I don't know if this diuk is 100% a good diuk or not. I have to think why it should be that way. But all right, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Yud Daled. Litzarchoi. What happens if you need to go into the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash for your needs? Says the Mishnah Berurah an interesting thing. 1 second. I'm looking at the wrong Mishnah Berurah. Let's go back. Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Yud Aleph. That's where we are. Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Yud Aleph. The Mechaber said either say some psukim, right? Either Yikra Ma'at or Yomer Dvar Shmua. What's a Dvar Shmua? Says the Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Yud Aleph Shmua. Pirish halacha a Mishnah. Either a halacha or a Mishnah. I also saw brought down, let me see if it was in the Darash. No, I saw it brought down somewhere that it could also be, like I said, a vart, a dvar Torah, a dvar shmua. Tell somebody, zag epis, or go to somebody else and tell them a vart on the parsha. First do the learning, then call the guy who you have to call. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what the Mechaber wants to say is, but don't do it the opposite way. Aval loy yakdim akriya mikaidim. Don't call the fellow first and then learn. Sheyomer eze divrei Torah. Return to Loimer. Aval loy yakdim akriya mikaidim sheyomer eze divrei Torah. Don't call the fellow out before you say some dvar Torah. Nira da'amira se divrei Torah hu rak tafel. Because then you're making it very, very, very apparent that the dvar Torah was really only secondary to calling the person out. Now, it happens to be that that's true. But even though it's true, we don't want it to look that way to other people. Now, Dirshu footnote number 30, I'm not going to read the footnote inside, but he just points out over here that even if you have to go into the Bais HaMedrash to call somebody, when you go into the Bais HaMedrash or the Bais HaKnesses for some other purpose other than learning, still remain mindful of Kedushas Bais HaKnesses, like he brings down over here from the Reishis Chachma and the Pele Yoyetz. Shalo Yagbias Koiloi. Don't walk into the Bais HaMedrash and yell, Pliny, you have a phone call. No, be mindful of the Kedushas Bais HaKnesses. You still should maintain you should comport yourself in a way where it's clear that you have Moira HaMikdash. Eis Katan Yud Gimel, we said if the only eitzah you have is to wait in the Bais HaKnesses or the Bais HaMedrash, you should wait kidei hiluch, the amount of time it takes to walk 8 tfachim. Hainu sheyish shir hiluch 2 psachim. You should wait the amount of time it takes to walk a distance equal to the width of 2 doorways. Dainu shmayna tfachim, which we learned in Siman Tzadik previously, is 8 tfachim. Now we go to Sif Beis, about halfway down the page in the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Mechaber, V'yesh Oimrim. There are those that say, and the Baragola brings this down from the Reb and Chaviv and the Beis Yosef. V'yesh Oimrim. There are those that say, Shamash Sheninu B'Kedushas Patei Midrashos. When we speak about the requirements of Kedushas Bais HaMedrash, Roitza Loimer Shal Rabim. We're talking about a public Bais HaMedrash. Dumya to Bais HaKnesses. When we talk about a Bais HaKnesses, we're talking about a shul. When we talk about a shul, intrinsically, a shul is a public building. A shul is where the tzibbur gathers to make a minyan and daven. So when we talk about a Bais HaMedrash, we're talking about a Bais HaMedrash for the tzibbur, where it's open for the tzibbur to come and learn. But how about when somebody makes a Bais HaMedrash in his house? Look at this. Look behind you. I'm saying shir in the room in my house that we refer to as the library, right? And that's where I do a lot of my learning. I prepare the shir most often in this room. You usually see me saying the shir upstairs in another room that I have that's kind of decked out as a studio. It has most of my recording equipment. Right now I'm using a different setup because the truth is I like saying shir here better. But this is on the main floor of my house, and usually people are coming and going and it's noisy. So usually I don't say shir here. Today I have the opportunity to say shir here, so I prepared here. I have my svarim, so I just went and said shir here. But this is kind of like a Bais HaMedrash Shel Yochid. This is my personal Bais HaMedrash. I spend hours learning in this room every day. So says the Mechaber here in Sif Beis, when we're talking about Kedushas Bais HaMedrash, Yeshoimim shemash sheninu b'Kedushas bati b'drasha yisrot zelaim sharabim dumya de Bais HaKnesses aval yachid a kaveh medrash bebeisa l'tzarchai. But a yachid who makes a room for himself as a Bais HaMedrash ain't like kedusha kol kach. It doesn't have so much kedusha that it has the requirements that we're speaking about over here about what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say, and if you're allowed to go in and if you're not allowed to go in. If this room had that level of kedusha, it would affect the whole household tremendously. What kedusha does it have? That's a very interesting question. There is a mashmais in halacha, and right from over here, ein lo kedusha kol kach, but it looks like there is a certain level of kedusha, and that's something that in a chinami I have to look into. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut yadal l'tzarchai. This is talking about a private room that you made as a Bais HaMedrash for your own personal use. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Aval mehigdish bayis l'tzarich rabim lilmoid bay. But if you open up a room in your house for the rabbim to come learn in, afilu emein mispalin sham klal, even if they never daven there, yeshalav kedushas Bais HaMedrash, so that it becomes a Bais HaMedrash. And then all these halachos kick in. Vayil kaban b'simin kofton gimel. Take a look later in simin kofton gimel sivches linyan Bais HaKnesses v'huadin linyan zeh, where we're going to discuss the halachos. What happens if somebody has a house and then he starts using it for minyanim? He starts using it for learning. Does it become a Bais HaMedrash or a Bais HaKnesses? Okay, weiter. Sif gimel. Ein yeshenim bebeis HaKnesses. You're not allowed to sleep in a Bais HaKnesses. Afilu shinas arai. Even a very short little catnap. Even a temporary sleep. A shinas arai. Now I'm going to break here for a second and go straight to the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Tezvav, because we need to see a point that he's going to make. Ein yeshenim. So the halakha that the Mechaber just said was, in a Bais HaKnesses, you're not allowed to sleep, even a shinas arai. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what kind of people are we talking about? Says the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Tezvav, umayri ba'anoshim da alma. We're talking about stam people. Aval the Talmud Chacham, but a Talmud Chacham, kisheloi made sham, if he's learning Torah in the Bais HaKnesses. Now we're talking about a Bais HaKnesses, not a Bais HaMedrash. So a Talmud Chacham went to shul to daven, and after davening, he doesn't leave right away. He has a seder. He learns the daf. He chazes yesterday's daf. Maybe he's in there for 2-3 hours after davening. A Talmud Chacham kishaloi mitcham kfar bayarnu b'sif katan vav deshari. Earlier in Sif Katan Vav, we already said that a Talmud Chacham is allowed to eat and drink in a Bais HaKnesses, in a Bais HaMedrash, and the Mishnah Berurah said he's also allowed to sleep. So this is not talking about a Talmud Chacham. So now let's go again into the Mechaber, and let's read again from the beginning of Sif Beis. The Yeshayimim, there are those that say, Sif Gimel, I'm sorry. The Mechaber says, Ein Yeshenim beBeis HaKnesses, regular people, not Tamid Chachamim, are not allowed to sleep in the Bais HaKnesses, afilu shinas arai, even a very short little catnap. Avol beBeis HaMedrash mutter. But even, sounds like, even regular people, because that's what we're talking about. Avol beBeis HaMedrash mutter. But in a Bais HaMedrash, even stam people are allowed to sleep, it sounds like, a shinas arai. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Tezayin, Avol beBeis HaMedrash mutter. Ritzayna Lomar, shinas arai. What's mutter in the Bais HaMedrash? A shinas arai. So again, let's just reiterate over here, according to the Mishnah Berurah, what we just saw in the Mechaber. The Mechaber is talking about stam anoshim. He's not talking about Tamid Chachamim. Stam anoshim are not allowed to sleep a shinas arai in a Bais HaKnesses, but stam anoshim are allowed to sleep a shinas arai in a Bais HaMedrash. Okay. Now, first, before we even go weiter in the Mishnah Berurah, let's take a look at the Bir Halacha. Dibur HaMaskel Avol beBeis HaMedrash mutter. So first, says the Bir Halacha, now we have to stop and pause. What are our Batei Midrashim? 99.9%, if not all, of our Batei Midrashim nowadays are also Batei Knesiyos. They daven in them. We don't have a Bais HaKnesses that people daven in, and then a Bais HaMedrash that people learn in. We have, most of our shuls are Bati Midrashim. They're used for learning and for davening. Now this Sif Cotton in Shulchan Aruch draws a distinction between the Bais HaKnesses and the Bais HaMedrash. Stam Anoshim are not allowed to sleep in the Bais HaKnesses, but they are allowed to sleep in the Bais HaMedrash. Says the Chavetz Chaim here in the Bir Halacha, Ubebati Midrashi Shalanu, our Bati Midrashis, Shemispalin Behem Gamkein, where they also daven, right? L'chayra lav griya mi Bais HaKnesses, lavad, they're no less kadosh than a regular Bais HaKnesses, right? So if we're being machmir on a Bais HaKnesses, we're saying in a Bais HaKnesses, stam anoshim are not allowed to sleep. In a Bais HaMedrash, they are. So you're saying that a Bais HaKnesses is more chamor than a Bais HaMedrash. But our Bati Midrashim are also Bati Knesiyos, because we daven in them as well. So the Bais HaMedrash is not less than the Bais HaKnesses. V'asar afilu arai. And you're telling me that stam anoshim are not allowed to sleep in a Bais HaKnesses, even a shinas arai. But, so, what the Chavetz Chaim is saying is, l'chayra, what should come out over here from Siv Gimel, is that stam anoshim are not allowed to sleep nowadays, not in a Bais HaKnesses and not in a Bais HaMedrash. Because all of our Bati Midrashim are also Bati Knesiyos. But then the Chavetz Chaim says, "Ulefia tam she'izbarnu b'siv cotton tezayin." But based on what we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah now, nice cotton tezayin, efsher deshari. Maybe it's takamutter for stam anoshim to take a shinas arai, a little catnap, in one of our Bati Midrashim. V'tzarech iyun. Okay, now let's jump back to the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ais cotton tezayin, avol beveis hamedrash mutter, v'tzayin lo mishinas arai. V'ayin b'chedusha Rabbi Kiva Eger. He says, take a look at the Rabbi Kiva Eger, shemikfakfik beheter zeh. The Rabbi Kiva Eger is not so happy with this heter that stam anoshim are allowed to sleep a shinas arai in a Bais HaMedrash. He's not so happy with this heter. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, the efsher the kevin shebeis HaMedrash also lishoy sham zman harbe lilmoid v'lishmaya divrei Torah. But since the fact is that in our Bati Midrashim nowadays, the derech is for people to stay there to learn for a significant amount of time, or to listen to the Rav's drasha for a significant amount of time, sometimes when people are tired, v'kasha lizara mishinas arai, and it's hard sometimes not to fall asleep. Al kain lo asru zeh l'shum adam. That's why they allowed even stam anoshim to take a shinas arai in the Bais HaMedrash, because very often in the Bais HaMedrash you're a captive audience listening to a long drasha, and you're tired and you're going to fall asleep. I've been there. But sitting in shul, and the Rav gets up and he decides to speak Shabbos by davening for 25 minutes, and yes, I fell asleep. So to aser a shinas arai in a Bais HaMedrash, even to stam anoshim, is very hard. Or for a Talmid Chacham who learns in the Bais HaMedrash b'kvius, mutter afilu shinas kva. Then even a shinas kva is mutter. He pashut could pull up 3 chairs, lay down, and say, I'm going to sleep for an hour. Kain mashma b'lavush. Okay, moving along. Siv Daled. Litzarich Bais HaKnesses, in order to provide for the needs of the Bais HaKnesses, mutter lechol v'lishan b'saychai, you're allowed to eat, you're allowed to sleep in the shul. Umitamzeh, and because of this, yeshenim b'leil yom HaKippurim b'Bais HaKnesses, it was the minhag for people to sleep in the shul the night of Yom Kippur, and we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah why that's called tzarich Bais HaKnesses. Va'afilu tzarich mitzvah acheres, and even if it's for the need of a different mitzvah, not specifically for the need of the Bais HaKnesses, when they would get together to be ma'aber the month or to be ma'aber the year, to make a leap month or a leap year, mutter lechol sham, you're allowed to eat there. Says the Mishnah Berurah Yud Zayin, l'tzarich Bais HaKnesses, kigoyin misha shomer oisai. The shomer of the Bais HaKnesses is allowed to sleep in the Bais HaKnesses. He's there for the tzarich of the Bais HaKnesses. He's there to protect, to give security to the Bais HaKnesses. Yudches v'lishan b'saychai, and he could sleep there. But v'lo yachnis b'tasei l'sham. Don't bring your bed in. You could sleep, but you don't bring your bed into the Bais HaKnesses. But ubel Yerabba chaylik alav. Yel Yerabba disagrees. V'chei b'kedusha Rabbi Akiva Eiger ayin sham. They say you could bring your bed in. Ice cut in your test. The Mechaber said to be tamzeh. They had a minute to sleep in the shul Yom Kippur night. How is that l'tzarech Bais HaKnesses? Ritzayin alarmik de lishmar nerois. Because we know there's a minute to be marbe b'nerois. And also everybody has a ner for their family. So they bring lots of candles and yartzeit lichtalach and everything else to the shul. They didn't have smoke alarms. Somebody has to watch the neris. So they would sleep in the Bais HaKnesses. La'aber Ashana. Also, if you're going to make a suda, I'm not sure that I understand what the nature of this suda was when they got together to be ma'aber the shana or to be ma'aber the month. They had to get together to decide, do we have to make an Adar Sheni? Do we not? They had to decide this month, should it be 29 days? Should it be 30 days? But why was there a Suda? I'm not sure if the Suda was just there because they had to get together and have a meeting and discuss this. Memela, they got a lazy Susan, for people to eat. Jews can't have a meeting without food. Or if there was some Indian of making a Suda, I'm not clear on that. Ayin b'Magen Avram, the Magen Avram says, Shehevi b'Shem Agos Smak, to loy hutter b'Sudas mitzvah, we're not, he says right here, it's a Sudas mitzvah, I'm sorry. It's very apparent from the Mishnah Berurah that this is a Sudas mitzvah. To loy hitter b'Sudas mitzvah, elikigayin Suda ibur shana she'en b'kalos roish. When we could be matir to eat and drink in the Bais HaKnesses, that's only if it's the type of eating and drinking where there isn't going to be any kalos roish. This was a suda, it was just some bread and some kidneys. Or it's an loymar la fuke sudas mitzvah sheyesh bashichras. We're not talking about a heintige kiddush with $300 bottles of booze. Also af Bais HaMedrash, that's also even a Bais HaMedrash. But those who are makel and they make a suda for a siyam hashas and they make a ganze suda, that's okay. You can't be meicha. They have who to be saimach on. Okay. Let's just quickly do Sif Hey. We're pushing the time limit here. I just want to mention before the end of the share, because I don't want anybody to miss it. Since the beginning of the Siman, there may very well be people in the audience who are listening to this, and their minds are shut down because they're like, I don't understand. We have kiddush in the shul all the time. What is all of this? We're not allowed to eat. We're not allowed to drink, especially a suda if there's shichros involved. What do you mean? We have kiddashim in the shul all the time, and there's wine, and there's schnapps, and there's cholent, and there's kugel, and there's herring, and there's cake, and there's cookies. So how does that fit in with everything that we're learning? The answer to that is going to come up. Part of the answer is actually contained in a Dirshu footnote on today's page, but really they jumped the gun. Maybe they jumped the gun because they knew everybody's going to be pondering this question. It's based on a bir halacha that we'll have tomorrow, Mirz Hashem, on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. So we will get there. Now let's take a look at Sif Hey, 4 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch, Lamed Beis, Amud Beis. Hayu lebeis HaKnesses shnei psachim. Let's say the shul had 2 doors. Lo yikanes b'Pesach zeh. You're not allowed to come in one door. La'asosei derech lotzeis b'Pesach sheni. So that you have a shortcut. Sometimes you can have a shul where there's one door that comes from one block, and you could cut through the shul and go out another door on the other block, and it will actually be shorter for you to get where you're going. If you want to get where you're going, you might have to walk around the shul. Now you don't have to walk around the shul, you go through, right? The shortest point between 2 lines is a straight line. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So sometimes you can make a shortcut by going through the shul. Says the Mechaber, you're not allowed to do this. That's what it means that you're not allowed to make the shul a kapandria, a shortcut. So you're not allowed to come in one door, in order to go out the other door, in order to make a shortcut. However, if there was a pathway where everybody used to walk before they built the shul, and now they built the shul there, then all bets are off. Then you're allowed to walk through the shul. Same way I used to walk over there. I used to walk over there all the time. Now you built a shul. Now I'm allowed to walk through. V'chein, similarly, if you went into the shul for something else, you didn't go in for a shortcut. I went into the shul for something else. Now it's time for me to leave the shul. I'm allowed to go out the other door. I'm allowed to go out the other door. As a matter of fact, if you went into the shul in order to daven, mutter, and some say, we'll see in the Mishnah, it's a mitzvah, mutter lemisha nichtas bepesach zeh, then it's mutter for somebody who came in one door, lotzeis bepesach acher, to go out the other door. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah here. Ois kar chafalef, mutter lemisha nichtas, tzarech loiber mitzvah lemisha nichtas. If you went in to daven, so you came in the east door of the shul to daven, and now there's a door on the west, there are those that say it's a mitzvah to go out the west door. It's a mitzvah l'misha nichtas. The Gemara Ma'asil is a mikra. The Gemara Megillah brings a pasuk. Shedemar, the pasuk in Yecheskel says, "Ubevayam ha'aretz lefnei Hashem b'mayadim." When the Klal Yisrael would come to be oil regel, and they would come to the shul on the Yom Tov, haba derech shar tzafayin lehishtachavos. If somebody would come in one of the northern gates of the Harabayis complex in order to come and be mishtachaveh by the Bais HaMedrash, Yetzei Derech Shar Negev. He would go out one of the southern gates. So you come in on the north, you go out on the south. V'atam kidei sheyeh nireh kemechabev. The reason for that is that shows a love of being on the Harabayis. In other words, I didn't come in and then when it was time to leave, turn around and go out my direct route. No, I came in and now I walked through the whole Harabayis and I went out on the other side. Maybe even though I have to go around. Why? It shows the great love for being on the Harabayis by the Bais HaMedrash. We'll stop over here. We'll continue next time with Sifav. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schos of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shem should send Yeshua's refuahs, parnas, and shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the bias koil tzedek b'mehera v'yameinu amen. Be well.